If you are over 60 and struggling to lose weight, here is the truth most people are never told. You could be eating less than ever, walking every day, and still gaining fat because your body is hormonally programmed to store it. This has nothing to do with willpower, and it has nothing to do with insulin. After age 60, the body loses up to half of its ability to switch into fat-burning mode. At the same time, one silent hormone rises and locks fat inside your cells, especially around the abdomen. Studies show this hormone can increase belly fat storage by more than 70%, even when calories are reduced. This is why so many older adults say, "I don't eat much anymore," but the weight keeps creeping up. And if this continues unchecked, the consequences are not cosmetic. It leads to muscle loss, weakness, rising blood sugar, joint pain, and eventually loss of independence. But once you understand what this hormone is and how to lower it safely, fat loss can begin again, even after 60. This information does not come from trends, influencers, or internet opinions. It comes from physicians and metabolic researchers who have spent more than 3 decades working directly with older adults, men and women over the age of 55, who were doing everything they were told and still gaining weight. These clinicians have treated tens of thousands of patients struggling with stubborn fat gain after midlife, patients who were walking daily, patients who were eating less than ever, patients whose lab work often showed normal insulin, yet whose waistlines continued to expand year after year. In one long-term clinical analysis, a single physician tracked outcomes in over 12,000 adults between the ages of 55 and 80. Instead of focusing on calorie restriction or aggressive exercise, the intervention targeted this specific hormone and its effects on aging metabolism. The results were striking. More than 68% of patients experienced measurable fat loss within just 90 days without extreme dieting, without exhausting cardio routines, and without weight loss medications. Even more importantly, the majority preserved muscle mass and reported improved energy, balance, and metabolic stability. These outcomes were not isolated cases. They were observed repeatedly across aging populations, across different lifestyles, and across both men and women. When this hormone was addressed correctly, fat loss resumed, not because patients tried harder, but because their biology was finally working with them instead of against them. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is clinical reality, documented over decades, and it explains why so many older adults fail with conventional advice and why a different approach finally works after 60. The hormone silently blocking fat loss after 60 is cortisol. Cortisol is often referred to as the stress hormone, but that label is misleading and incomplete. Stress is only one of the many signals that control cortisol release. In reality, cortisol is one of the body's most important survival hormones, designed to manage energy during times of uncertainty. Cortisol's primary job is not to make you anxious. Its real job is energy preservation. When cortisol rises, the body assumes that resources may soon be scarce. In response, it slows non-essential functions, protects stored energy, and prioritizes survival over optimization. This response is extremely useful in short bursts, especially in youth. In younger adults, cortisol behaves dynamically. It rises briefly in response to stress, physical exertion, or low blood sugar, and then falls quickly once the situation resolves. This rise and fall pattern allows the body to mobilize energy when needed and then return to fat-burning mode once the threat has passed. After age 60, this system changes. Instead of rising and falling, cortisol often remains chronically elevated. It does not spike dramatically, but it fails to shut off completely. This low-grade, persistent elevation is subtle, but its metabolic consequences are profound. Why does this happen? First, the aging brain becomes more sensitive to stress signals. The hypothalamus and adrenal system, which regulate cortisol, respond more strongly to smaller stressors. Situations that would have caused minimal hormonal response at age 40 can trigger a sustained cortisol release at age 65. Second, sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented with age. Even when total sleep time appears adequate, deep restorative sleep is often reduced. Cortisol is supposed to fall at night. When sleep is disrupted, cortisol remains elevated into the early morning hours, interfering with metabolic recovery and fat burning. Third, blood sugar regulation becomes less stable over time. Aging muscles become less efficient at absorbing glucose, and liver glucose output becomes more erratic. These fluctuations are interpreted by the body as an energy threat, prompting additional cortisol release, even in the absence of obvious stress. Fourth, and critically, muscle mass declines with age. Muscle is not just for movement, it is a major regulator of blood sugar and cortisol clearance. As muscle mass decreases, the body becomes less capable of buffering stress hormones. This creates a feedback loop. Higher cortisol accelerates muscle loss, and less muscle allows cortisol to remain elevated. When cortisol stays high, the body enters what can be called fat protection mode. In this state, fat is no longer viewed as excess energy. It is viewed as a survival reserve. The body becomes resistant to releasing it, regardless of calorie intake or physical activity. Internally, cortisol triggers several specific changes. First, it signals fat cells to refuse the release of stored fat. Even when insulin levels are normal and calorie intake is reduced, fat cells remain locked. This is why dieting often stops working after 60. Second, cortisol breaks down muscle tissue to provide emergency fuel. Muscle is metabolically expensive to maintain, and cortisol prioritizes short-term glucose availability over long-term strength. This is why weight loss in older adults often comes from muscle rather than fat. Third, cortisol raises blood sugar even when you have not eaten. It stimulates the liver to release glucose into the bloodstream, preparing for perceived danger. Over time, this contributes to insulin resistance and metabolic fatigue. Fourth, cortisol redirects calories preferentially toward abdominal fat. The abdominal region has a high density of cortisol receptors, making it particularly sensitive to this hormone. This is why belly fat becomes disproportionately resistant with age. This combination explains a common and frustrating experience in older adults. Insulin may appear normal on lab tests. Calories may be reduced, activity levels may be reasonable, and yet abdominal fat remains stubbornly unchanged. The problem is not effort. The problem is hormonal signaling. Until cortisol is addressed directly, the body will continue to defend fat storage as a survival strategy. Understanding this mechanism is the key to reversing it safely and effectively after 60.
One of the most damaging aspects of weight loss advice given to older adults is that it often encourages behaviors that actively worsen the hormonal environment after 60. These mistakes are rarely made out of ignorance or laziness. In most cases, they are the result of well-intentioned advice that fails to account for aging biology. The first and most common mistake is eating less in an attempt to force weight loss. From a biological perspective, aggressive calorie restriction sends a powerful signal to the aging body that food is scarce. In response, cortisol rises. This rise is not subtle. In seniors, calorie restriction activates a survival response that prioritizes energy conservation over fat loss. Clinical data makes this clear. In studies of adults over the age of 60, those who significantly reduced calorie intake showed an average 23% increase in cortisol levels after several weeks. Despite consuming fewer calories, these individuals experienced no meaningful fat loss after 12 weeks. In many cases, metabolic rate declined further, making future weight loss even more difficult. A real-world example illustrates the danger. A 67-year-old woman, frustrated by gradual weight gain, reduced her intake to approximately 1,200 calories per day. The scale did move. However, body composition testing revealed that nearly 80% of the weight she lost came from muscle, not fat. As her muscle mass declined, her metabolism slowed, her balance worsened, and fatigue increased. The very strategy meant to improve her health accelerated metabolic aging. The second common mistake is excessive cardio. For decades, older adults have been told that more walking, longer sessions, and higher daily step counts are the solution to weight gain. While movement is essential for health, long-duration endurance exercise has a very different hormonal effect in older bodies. Sustained cardio elevates cortisol, especially when performed daily without adequate recovery. In younger adults, this cortisol spike is temporary. In older adults, it often lingers. Over time, this persistent elevation promotes muscle breakdown and reinforces fat storage. Research comparing exercise types in seniors highlights this effect. Older adults who performed daily endurance exercise showed cortisol levels nearly twice as high as those who engaged in brief resistance-based movement. Despite burning calories during exercise, the long-term hormonal impact favored fat retention. A patient example underscores this paradox. A retired school teacher committed to walking 90 minutes every day. Her cardiovascular fitness improved, but her body composition did not. Her weight remained unchanged, yet her waist circumference slowly increased. The daily cardio was not freeing fat, it was signaling chronic stress. The third mistake is ignoring sleep fragmentation. Sleep quality changes with age, and many older adults accept lighter, interrupted sleep as inevitable. However, fragmented sleep is one of the most potent triggers of cortisol elevation. Cortisol is designed to fall at night. When sleep is disrupted, cortisol remains elevated into the morning, interfering with fat oxidation and muscle recovery. This effect can occur even if total sleep time appears adequate. The data is striking. Studies show that just 1 week of fragmented sleep can increase cortisol levels by 37% while reducing fat-burning capacity by 55%. This shift alone can halt weight loss, regardless of diet or exercise. A 72-year-old man experienced this firsthand. Despite stable eating habits, his weight continued to rise. Instead of changing his diet, he corrected his sleep timing and reduced nighttime disruptions. Within several months, he lost 11 pounds without any dietary changes, simply by allowing cortisol to normalize. These 3 mistakes share a common thread. They all increase cortisol in an aging body that is already sensitive to stress. They don't fail because older adults are doing them incorrectly. They fail because the advice itself is biologically mismatched to aging physiology. Understanding what not to do is a critical step. Only by removing these hidden cortisol triggers can fat loss become possible again after 60. Once cortisol is identified as the primary hormonal barrier to fat loss after 60, the solution becomes far clearer. The goal is not to fight the body, but to signal safety, to convince the nervous system and metabolism that energy is available, recovery is possible, and fat no longer needs to be protected. The first and most important strategy is to eat in a way that signals stability, not starvation. In aging physiology, irregular or insufficient nutrition is interpreted as a threat. When meals are skipped or calories are aggressively reduced, cortisol rises in an effort to preserve energy. By contrast, balanced meals that provide consistent fuel tell the body that it is safe to release stored fat. Protein plays a central role in this process. Adequate protein intake reduces cortisol, stabilizes blood sugar, and protects muscle tissue, all of which are essential for fat loss after 60. Research shows that consuming 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal can reduce cortisol spikes by approximately 31% in older adults. This effect occurs within hours, not weeks. The practical application is simple and sustainable. Aim for 3 structured meals per day. Each meal should include a meaningful source of protein, such as eggs, fish, poultry, dairy, or legumes. Long fasting windows should be avoided unless medically supervised, as they often elevate cortisol in seniors rather than improving metabolism. The objective is not to eat more, but to eat consistently and adequately. The second strategy is to replace long-duration cardio with cortisol-calming movement. Movement remains essential for health and longevity, but the type and duration of movement matter greatly after 60. Prolonged endurance exercise can act as a chronic stressor, especially when recovery capacity is reduced. In contrast, brief resistance-based and balance-focused movement lowers cortisol while preserving muscle mass. Resistance training sends a powerful signal to the body that muscle is still needed. This signal directly counteracts cortisol's muscle-breaking effects. Studies have shown that as little as 2 20-minute resistance sessions per week can reduce cortisol levels by approximately 18% while increasing markers of fat metabolism in older adults. This does not require a gym or heavy weights. Chair-based resistance exercises, light dumbbells, or resistance bands are sufficient. The key is slow, controlled movement with attention to posture and breathing. Balance exercises further enhance nervous system regulation, reinforcing the message that the body is stable and capable. The third strategy is to restore circadian rhythm, particularly sleep timing. Cortisol follows a daily rhythm. It should peak in the morning and gradually decline throughout the day, reaching its lowest point at night. Aging often disrupts this rhythm, leading to elevated nighttime cortisol and impaired fat metabolism. Improving sleep timing alone can have a profound hormonal effect. Studies in adults over 65 have shown that restoring consistent sleep and wake times reduced cortisol levels by approximately 34%, even without changes in diet or exercise. The action steps are practical and achievable. Go to bed and wake up at the same time each day, including weekends. Expose the eyes to natural morning sunlight, which helps reset the brain's internal clock. In the evening, reduce artificial light exposure and avoid screens for at least 90 minutes before bedtime to allow cortisol to fall naturally. Together, these 3 strategies work synergistically. Eating consistently lowers cortisol spikes. Resistance-based movement preserves muscle and reduces stress signaling. Stable sleep timing allows hormonal rhythms to normalize. When these signals align, the body shifts out of fat protection mode. Fat loss is no longer forced. It becomes a natural consequence of restored hormonal balance, even after 60.
If you are over 60 and want medically accurate guidance on fat loss, longevity, and independence, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with your age or biggest health concern. This channel exists exclusively to help older adults extend quality of life, not just years.
Here is the most important truth to understand as we close. Your body is not broken. It has not failed you. It is not weak, lazy, or beyond repair. Your body is responding exactly as aging biology instructs it to respond. After 60, the rules change. The body becomes more protective, more cautious, and more focused on survival than appearance. Hormones shift, recovery slows. Signals that once faded quickly now linger longer. This is not a flaw. It is an adaptation designed to preserve life. When cortisol remains elevated, the body interprets the world as uncertain. In that state, fat loss is blocked, not because you were doing something wrong, but because the body believes it cannot afford to let go of stored energy. This is why effort alone stops working. This is why eating less often backfires. This is why doing more can lead to worse results. But when cortisol is lowered, when the body finally receives consistent signals of safety, stability, and recovery, everything changes. Fat loss no longer has to be forced. It no longer requires extreme restriction. It no longer comes at the expense of muscle, strength, or quality of life. The body begins to release fat naturally, the way it once did, because it no longer feels threatened. And when you restore hormonal balance, you are not simply changing a number on the scale. You are addressing the foundation of aging health. You are preserving muscle, which protects you from falls, fractures, and frailty. Muscle is the difference between independence and dependence as the years pass. It is the difference between getting up from a chair with confidence or hesitation. You are protecting your joints by reducing inflammatory stress and unnecessary load. Less abdominal fat means less strain on hips, knees, and the lower back, joints that determine how freely you can move through daily life. You are stabilizing blood sugar, reducing the risk of progression toward diabetes and its complications. Stable blood sugar supports brain health, vision, circulation, and energy, not just weight. You are often reducing the need for medications, or at least preventing the addition of new ones. Every medication avoided is one less interaction, one less side effect, one less burden on the body. And, perhaps most importantly, you are maintaining independence. Independence is not just about living alone or driving a car. It is about having confidence in your body, confidence that you can travel, confidence that you can keep up with grandchildren, confidence that you are not one fall, one illness, or one bad year away from losing control over your daily life. This is what hormone-informed aging is really about. It is not about chasing youth. It is not about extreme transformations. It is about aligning with biology instead of fighting it. When you understand why your body behaves the way it does after 60, frustration gives way to clarity, shame gives way to strategy, fear gives way to action. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and you start asking, "What does my body need now?" That shift alone is powerful. Everything you have learned in this video is about restoring that dialogue between you and your physiology, about making choices that calm the nervous system instead of stressing it, about sending signals of safety instead of scarcity, about supporting the systems that determine whether fat is stored or released. And this is not something that requires perfection. It requires consistency. It requires understanding. It requires patience with a body that has carried you for decades. You are not starting late. You are starting informed. If this message resonates with you, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. This channel exists for one purpose: to help you age stronger, leaner, and medically informed without fear-driven fads or one-size-fits-all advice. Here, we focus on the realities of aging biology. We focus on preserving independence, reducing unnecessary suffering, and extending not just lifespan, but health span, the years you can truly live well. Your future health is not determined by your past mistakes. It is shaped by the decisions you make now with the information you have today. And today, you know something most people never learn. You are not failing your body. Your body has been protecting you. Now you know how to protect it in return.